our members. Like, it wouldn't happen. But inside of your dealership, what happens? Technicians, come on in. The water's fine. Sure, pull your own parts. Let's make that happen. You say, oh, well, you're the sales manager, so your hyper detail and attention to detail here is fantastic. Come on back. No, literally no. Unless we have someone who is a general manager in our dealership or they work in the parts department, there is no reason in the world that they should come back into the parts department. There it is, mic drop, we can go away. Like, that's it. There is no reason they should come back into the parts department because what is the greatest disruptor of your parts inventory in your dealership? What is the single greatest disruptor? There's one thing.
Lost inventory.
Lost inventory, but who is our single greatest disruptor?
Owners and technicians.
Technicians. Owners probably. You're probably right. Owners too. You're like, you know what? Sure. Your neighbor Jim from down the road, here's the part. It's on me. Okay. Well, that's a different conversation we need to have. But like, what I see is the single greatest disruptor of parts inventory in any given situation is technicians, which brings me into the second thing that we have to guard when we think about the parts department as a bank vault, and something that would never happen inside of your local bank, but happens every single day inside of your dealership, and that's that you lose inventory. Could you imagine, with me for just a second, that inside of your parts department, you were walked into your local bank, and let's say that you had $10,000 stowed safely away in this bank vault. Congratulations. You're doing great. But you walked in and you talked to the bank manager, you said, hey, I'm here to get some money out of the bank. I'm gonna just get it out of the bank vault. I have this safety deposit box there. Fantastic. You sign all the documents, you give them a sample of blood and your firstborn child, they get in there for you, open up the bank vault, and they say, oh man, hey, this just happens sometimes. I've got some bad news. I know you had $10,000 in it, but we lost $5,000 of it. Like, that's not such a big deal, is it? What? That's not such a big deal. What are you talking about? That's a huge deal. That was $5,000 of my hard-earned money. Like, what do you mean that's not a big deal? But what happens every single day inside of your parts department if you don't have a parts process? We just lose it. It's just gone. Technicians are the greatest disruptor of our inventory in the parts department. So the very first thing I would do if I were in your shoes when I go home is I would make it very clear to technicians that they are no longer pulling their own parts. You say, but Sarah, what do they need parts? Well, we're going to put a process in place to make sure that they get their parts. You know, we did this study a few years ago, and I'm sure these numbers have changed dramatically since we did this about 5 years ago, but we were curious. If a technician were to look up and pull their own parts, not accounting for lost parts, just simply letting them look up and pull their own parts, what kind of labor money, dollars produced, we would have lost? And you know what the statistic is, what we found out, this was assuming an $80 an hour labor rate. If technicians look up and pull their own parts, we're losing $18,000 a year in lost labor per technician who pulls up their own parts. And that's with an $80 an hour labor rate. Now, if that's not enough to make you sick and say, don't touch parts technicians, I don't know what is. And that's just simply because they're losing that labor. So number two is we lose inventory in our parts department. We go, oh, what a travesty, it just happens sometimes. No, my friends, it doesn't just happen. We've got to have a process in place for that. Finally, the third thing that happens all the time inside of your parts department, but never happens in a bank, is that you don't make it sticky or hard to leave your parts department. Now, I have 3 young kids, so the word sticky has a very different meaning to me than what I'm trying to apply it as, okay? You know, if you have kids too, you know what I'm talking about. You're like, what in God's name is on you right now, and how did you get so sticky? Like, you need to be washed off with the hose. Y'all go through the childhood trauma of being washed off with the hose before your mom let you back in the house? Okay, me too. That's not what I'm talking about with this kind of sticky. But what I'm saying is that when you think about leaving your bank and trying to go to a new bank and starting an account somewhere else, how painful does that bank make it for you to leave? How many of you have ever tried to leave your bank and go to a new bank? Would you rather get a root canal than go do that again? Like, think about that. You've got your mortgage, you've got your accounts, you've got your savings, you've got loans, whatever it is. All of these things are so interconnected, and for you to leave that bank and go somewhere else, they make it like the worst case scenario. make it easy for you. So you finally go, you know what? I'm just gonna stick around because I don't want to have to go through that cruel and unusual punishment yet. Get it? I am not interested in that. Now, I'm not saying we want to make working with your parts department cruel and unusual punishment. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is that we've got to make ourselves so sticky in the parts department that they have the ability that they say, you know what, I don't want to go anywhere else. Because they take care of me here. They've got me set up for success here. I'm ingrained in so many different things that they're doing here that for me to go anywhere else is the biggest mistake I would make. The banks have this figured out. They realize if you have 7 accounts at a bank, okay, 7. So that could be number of checking accounts, savings accounts, maybe an auto loan, mortgage, whatever it is. Maybe your business account is at the same bank your personal accounts are. 7 accounts. The likelihood of you leaving and going somewhere else is less than 2%. Less than 2%. Because they know once you hit that number of 7, it's just too much work to go anywhere else. So I want us to start thinking about our parts department as this bank vault. And during the session today, we are going to simply go through 10 things that I want you to rate your parts department on. I am not going to ask you to share this with me or anyone else during the session, so I want you to be completely honest with yourself. But we're going to go through each of these things, one being, we are a dumpster fire. This needs addressed immediately. And 5 being, if there was a gold star to give out, I would get it. Okay, so that's how we're going to rate ourselves on this. 1 being, I'm a dumpster fire, and number 5 being, man, we are killing it over here. So we're going to go through 10 things that we need to be thinking about and actually looking at in regards to our parts department specifically. The first thing I want you to rate yourself on is this question. Is our parts inventory accurate? Okay, that's what I want you to ask the question. Is our parts inventory accurate? How important it is that our parts inventory is accurate? How important is that? Very important. And what did we say is the biggest disruptor of parts inventory? Technicians. And so when we think about the parts inventory, if I were to ask you today, is your parts inventory accurate? How many of you would say, I have a pretty good feeling that my parts inventory is mostly accurate today? All right, a few hands. All right, how many of you say, Sarah, I have no idea in the world if my parts inventory is accurate and it could be a dumpster fire. All right, I appreciate the honesty. All right, so there we are. We are in this place where we've got to address, is our parts inventory accurate? I was working with a group of about 300 parts managers about a year ago, and we were on a Zoom meeting because this was in the midst of COVID. Do you remember back in the time where we all had to have all of our meetings on Zoom? Bless that time, bless the technology, but I'm so thankful we're away from that. I was talking about 300 different parts managers over the course of a few months, and we were talking about parts inventory accuracy, which, again, what a topic to get our hearts racing. Like, let's go. And there was this lady on here. She was second generation in her family business. Her dad had 3 locations. They sold compact tractors and big ag, okay? They just opened up this 3rd location, and she had come on in the last year or so of the business. And as we were having conversations around parts inventory, she said, Sarah, you won't believe what happened. And I said, oh heavens. I don't ever love it when somebody says that you won't believe what happened, because normally that's not a good sign before it starts, right? Like, okay, great, we can't wait. It's normally not like, listen, our parts inventory is perfect and we are really killing it. That's not normally what comes right after they say it. You won't believe what happens. They said, my dad just opened up this new location. We were in the midst of so much change that we hadn't had a chance to slow down and do our parts inventory. And so we stopped, we shut everything down, did the parts inventory, and it turned out, Sarah, we were $300,000 off on our parts. And I'm sure my face said it before my mouth did. Anybody else have your face say it before your mouth does? Yeah, that's one of my maybe fatal flaws. Okay, so my face said it before my mouth did, and I said, oh wow, so what did we learn from that? And she goes, well, he wasn't very happy. And I bet he wasn't. She said, well, we just got so busy with the day-to-day of the business, with this growth trajectory, with this move, this new location, that we just lost sight of our inventory. And my friends, was that $300,000 of parts they lost gross profit or net profit that Daddy Dearest lost? Net profit. They had already paid for the parts, and this was money that should have been in Daddy Dearest's pocket, and he was not a happy person. And so what did I say to her? I said, here's the deal. As we go forward, we need a new plan for our parts inventory. When we talk about a new plan for our parts inventory, what I'm pushing right now. I could be speaking Chinese, Japanese, or even, I don't know, all I know in Spanish is like margarita. So that's like about all I know in Spanish. So it's like I'm even speaking a different language. When we talk about cyclical inventory counts, what I want you to do is every single day, we are going to do inventory on a small group of parts, okay? Every single day, we are going to print a report from our business management software, if we have one, that tells us what parts we need to look at, and we're going to look at those very specific parts every single day. How many of you in here are running a business management software in your dealership? Okay. If your hand is not up, I would just encourage you to go look at some of the software that is out there. I know there are a few here today. I know Lizzie's out there. I know Constellation is out there. And there's a few others out there that we recommend as well. So if you have questions on that, let's talk afterwards. But all of those have the ability to generate what we call the cyclical inventory report, where it pulls a list so that over the course of a year, you inventory your parts every single day. And so at the end of the year, we have a full inventory. You go, but Sarah, why don't we just do inventory once a year? Would that be easier? Okay, that sounds horrible. How many of you inventory your parts once a year? You either shut down the parts department, you do it overnight, whatever that looks like, once a year. All right, be honest with me. Does anybody actually enjoy that? No. How many of you would rather spend an extra week with your mother-in-law than do that? Like, okay, yeah, me too. That sounds horrible. I mean, we're not going to get into in-laws dynamics, but I'm just saying it. Like, let's go. All right, so when we're thinking about our parts inventory accuracy, we need to move towards cyclical counts, and I want you to rate yourself on a scale of 1, saying, we are a dumpster fire, I have no idea what parts we have, to a 5 of saying, Sarah, I feel like if somebody were to call into my dealership today, and they were to say, hey, I'm 60 miles away, and I need this part, you could look in your business management system, see that you have one in there, and you would say, come on in, without touching the part yourself. That is a 5, okay? That is a 5. How many of you could say, if somebody called and said, I'm 60 miles away, in your business management system it says there's one part in stock, that you would say, come on in, we got the part? Nobody. Okay, so that's what we're moving towards. That's what we're doing. How many of you, it said in your business management software that you had 2 in stock, you would bring them in? Okay, there's a few, but even in that situation, your inventory could be up to 50% off. Thank you, Siri, you're creepy. All right, so that's the first thing I want you to rate yourself on. The second thing, is your counter clean and your end caps maximized? When you walk up to your parts counter, does it look like you were the most charitable giver to all the candy bar things that are ever offered in this world? That should not be what your parts counter looks like. Your parts counter is what we would call lakefront real estate, okay? Your parts counter is what typically greets the majority of your customers, and we need it to look pristine and like it gets the most attention out of anything. And specifically, how are your end caps? On a scale of 1 to 5, rate your end caps in your counter. Is your counter clean enough that your mama would be proud of it, is the question. Would she come in and say, no, you need to clean this up, or would she say, man, that's looking good, all right? So that's the next question I want you to think about. When we think about end caps specifically, whether it's right underneath your parts counter or it's right in the midst of your showroom, your end caps are the most valuable real estate that you have in your dealership. Right? How many of you have ever actually thought about the placement of end caps and what has gone on it in the past? All right, I want you to start processing this just a little bit. When you walk into Home Depot, Lowe's, Target, Walmart, wherever you do your shopping, what do they always have on the end caps close to the register? What do they have? They've got impulse items, right? Close to the register. What do you say? Candy, food, and chips. Listen, I have never met a Diet Coke I didn't like, and every time I walk through one of those stores, do you want to know what I buy for double what I should probably pay for it? A Diet Coke. Do you think Target, Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart, all of those stores know what's going to happen when Sara walks through there? Oh, yes, they do. They have more data on us and know our buying strategies better than just about anyone. It's a little bit big brother, a little bit cool, but really, really creepy. And so when we look at this, we got to think about this in terms of how do Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, Target, and all of these other places make decisions on what goes on their end cap. If they had something on there that wasn't actually producing sales, do you think they would keep it on the end cap? Heck no, they would move that off real quickly, wouldn't they? They would say, we need to put something on here that actually is generating us profit. You know, we've done the math on this too, and we know that for every square foot of end cap space, that end cap needs to be generating about $350 per square foot. Walmart has that number to about $1,100 a square foot. So if you walk into a Walmart store and that per square foot is not generating $1,100, something will be changing in that display very, very quickly. We need to start thinking about this in terms of what this looks like inside of our dealership and our parts department. $350 a square foot is how we can see, well, that's great, Sarah, but how in the world do we actually track that? How do we do that? Inside again of your business management system, when we do our inventory, we have the ability to have additional parts bin locations. Are you guys aware of this? So in there, we're going to make parts bin locations on our end caps so that we can see the kind of revenue that's being generated on every single end cap for every single item that's in our parts department, on our end caps, and in our showroom. Because then we can make educated decisions as owners and managers about what gets the valuable square footage on it. Okay, so rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. Where are you at with that? The next question I want you to rate yourself on is, are you staffed appropriately? Are you staffed appropriately in your parts department? So I'm going to give you some numbers. And with these numbers, I want you to do some math. And again, you can pull out your phone. That's not going to offend me. Okay? I'm going to pull out your phone, but we're going to do some math to see where you are, if you're staffed, overstaffed, understaffed, or staffed just a little bit of right. Like we're doing 3 little bears up in here. Okay, that's what we're doing. Where are you at in regards to your staffing? How many of you only sell outdoor power equipment? That's all that you sell, just outdoor power equipment. Okay, if we're selling only outdoor power equipment, I would expect 1 full-time parts person. So they do nothing else other than sell parts. Okay, this could be the parts manager who's also doing the orders as well, but they're a full-time parts person behind the counter, should be generating between $350,000 and $450,000 worth of parts a year. Okay, 1 parts person can do $350,000 to $450,000 of parts every single year, and that includes from the service department as well. Okay, that's what we're talking about for outdoor power equipment. How many of you have compact tractors as a part of your makeup? Let me see your hands. All right, compact tractors. If you're in a place with compact tractors, I would expect 1 parts person to do between $450,000 and $550,000 a year of parts. Trailers. Who's in trailers here as well? Trailers would be in that $450,000 to $550,000 as well. Is there anybody in big ag in the room? Let me see your hand. Okay, so you're going to be between that $650,000 and $750,000 number. And is there anybody in construction at all? All right, some. Okay, so we're going to be in that $750,000 to probably $850,000 number. And so that includes over-the-counter walk-in customer parts, as well as the parts that we're sending back to the service department. So I want you to look at those numbers for just a second. And a quick show of hands, how many of you feel like, based on those numbers and what you've done for part sales, you are overstaffed right now? Does anybody feel like you are overstaffed? Okay, a few hands. How many of you feel like you're staffed just about right? Anybody feel like you're staffed just about right? All right, that's a good place to be. Anybody say, okay, Sarah, based on those numbers, I am understaffed right now. All right, most of you. Okay, most of you are in that spot. Here's the deal. Again, as I was doing all of this parts manager training over the course of about that year when we were in the midst of the COVID situation, I asked this question, and this parts manager piped up and he said, Sarah, I'm the best parts manager you have ever seen. I sell compact tractors, and alone, I am doing $2 million worth of part sales for compact tractors. And I say, wow, aren't you special, little snowflake? Okay, that's not what I said, but between friends, okay, that's what I said in my head. I said, aren't you special? That's pretty incredible. And I said, wow, that must take a lot of work. He goes, yeah, Sarah, I'm working 60 plus hours a week. It's a lot of work. And I said, so, how close are you to burnout? His face dropped. His face dropped. And he said, Sarah, I think about quitting every single day because I'm not sure how much longer I can do this. And after we had this conversation, I said, this is why these numbers matter. Sure, you may have a dealership where you have really qualified parts people who are able to achieve over those numbers for you just a little bit, and that's fantastic. That's fantastic. But when we start pushing these numbers based on what we're selling, they need to be at least a yellow thing blinking for us saying, proceed with caution. Let's start looking for somebody else to support our parts people so that they can do what they do really, really well. The moment that we overlook this and we put them on a trajectory to burnout, how hard would it be to replace a parts manager who's doing $2 million of compact tractor parts every single year? How hard would that be to replace? Holy smokes, I wouldn't want to do that. If I can bring somebody in to support that person, that's the trajectory I want to go. Now, we typically bring a person into our parts department that we call the parts support specialist. How many of you have heard of parts support specialist before? All right, our parts support specialist is a support person for the parts department who has one main overarching job. Their number one job, and they typically are a mom with kids in school, is who we find to be this position. We let them come in around 10 o'clock every day, and they leave by 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. So a part-time person, as long as you have less than 7 technicians, okay? We'll dive into more than 7 technicians in just a second. But if you have less than 7 technicians, we can have this person be a part-time person for us. And their number one responsibility every single day is to put away the stocking order. That's their number one responsibility every single day, is to put away the stocking order of parts that we get in. You know what I'm talking about. We get this order in, it's sitting on the floor, we're like doing the weird stocking order dance, like, I don't see it, because if I see it, I have to put it away. Don't lie, you guys do that too, right? Like, you do that too. The moment the person who sees it has to put it away, so then it just gets real weird. So we bring this part support specialist in, and her first priority typically is to make sure the stocking order is put away. The second thing that she does every day is she pulls the parts that the technicians are going to need for the next day. That's the second thing she does. And then finally, she provides support at the parts counter for someone who just basically needs to be checked out of the parts counter. She's not necessarily pulling parts, having the conversations around parts, but simply going to make sure that we get the person checked out. Because I'm sure at your dealership too, you have Mr. Smith who comes into the dealership, right? You've got Mr. Smith. He's in his late 80s, early 90s, and he has made one big trip today, and that was to your dealership to get an oil filter. Do you know who I'm talking about? And so Mr. Smith comes in, you've got your best parts person who's working with Mr. Smith, while you have an entire line of people behind Mr. Smith who's sitting here trying to get their parts, but Mr. Smith would love to just take a few minutes and debrief you on his most loved riding tractor that he's had for 20 years, and that's special. And so we're in this really weird situation, and so we get through this, we got Mr. Smith, his oil filter, and we're like, okay, Mr. Smith, and he's like, but wait, I've got a decision to make. Am I going to use cash? Am I going to use a personal check? Or am I going to use one of those evil credit cards? What am I going to make? And you're like, oh my gosh, I have my best parts person tied up with Mr. Smith, and he's trying to make a decision. So I've got a line of people out the door waiting for parts. How do we handle this? Our parts support specialist is the person who helps check out customers when we need that extra set of hands. So in this moment, this is how we start opening up some of the capacity for other parts people. Does that make sense? We let that person do some of the things that our other parts people would have to do so that they can be focused on doing what they do really good, which is being a really good parts person. The other thing about this parts support specialist that I love is the fact that this person will be our next parts person. They're our parts person in training, because how do you learn how to be a good parts person? How do you do that? You look up parts, touch parts, and put parts away? Is that how we do it? And so what are we training this person to do? Look up parts, touch parts, put parts away. So when this person comes and says their kids are a little bit older and she's hoping that maybe there's some more hours that she could utilize at the dealership, before you start jumping up and down with glee and say, I've been waiting for this moment forever, you say, yeah, I'm sure we can work something out. Because you have been training this person to be in this position for a long time. We always say our goal is to hire low and grow into who we need them to be. And this is a perfect example of this. In the parts department, we hire low with a parts support specialist, and we grow them into who we need them to be. Now, how many of you here have less than 7 technicians in your dealership? Quick show of hands. All right, so for the majority of you, this part-time position is all that we're going to need. A low-level person that we can grow. Now, how many of you have more than 7 technicians in your dealership? Now, if we've got more than 7 in our dealership, I would encourage you to think about this person as a full-time person for your dealership. They would work right alongside the service manager in the service department, and it would take them more of a full-time position to be able to pull the parts for 7 technicians, as well as focus on the stocking order, and then provide the support to the front, with helping to check out. The next thing, I want you to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5 is we have all of the pricing on all parts displays. As you think about your parts right now, how many of you feel confident that you could write a 5 for that? I've got all of the parts pricing done in my showroom. No one. Okay, no one. So here's what I want you to think about. We've got to have pricing on our parts, because if there is no price on something, what does that mean?
Not for sale.
It's not for sale. Have you looked at this before? You've walked into a store before, you pick something up, you're like, okay, I'm gonna buy this. This is exciting. I love this. This is what I'm gonna get. And then there's no price on it. How many of you have ever put something back down because there was no price on it? Yeah, me too. How many of you have mustered up the courage and walked over to the person at the line, the whole entire line of the sales counter, stood in line to simply ask the question, how much is this? Have you guys done that too? Sure. But what's our default? It's not for sale, it doesn't have a price on it. So when we think about merchandising and retailing in our showroom, we've got to have prices on everything. Now, it can be a generalized price for a series of things. Let's say we've got a bunch of oil on a shelf. We don't need every single one to have a price on it, but we need to have it on the shelf that all of these are X amount of dollars. Now, one of the things I get often is they go, Sarah, that's great, but like, as we do this, what about price updates? Have y'all been part of price updates lately? Like you're like every 30 seconds I turn around and I get price updates, and it seems like my business management software is charging me for all of them. That's fantastic, right? Okay, some of you know. Some of you got that software. That's fantastic. Love that for you. All right, so when this happens with the price updates, there is technology we can use that will automatically do that. So some supermarkets are using that, but there are price tags that you can put on so it automatically adjusts it based upon your pricing updates. So that's something we can think about. The other thing that we know is that if we have something we need to move and we have a price on it, one of the most effective ways to move something really quickly out of our parts inventory with a price on it is getting those little cardboard bins. Do you know what I'm talking about? They have them at the end of the aisle on Home Depot or Lowe's, and putting it up there with a giant sticker that has a handwritten number on it. In people's brains, what happens with those things in those bins with those prices on them? It says that this is the end of the road, and if you want to grab this, you better grab it now. And what retailing has found in hardware stores and other stores like that is that if we have that on there, the percentage of people who will buy it out of that little cardboard bin is so much higher because they think it's the last thing, but it all has to do with it being priced on there. So rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. How are you doing on your parts pricing on your displays? Okay, the next one, on a scale of 1 to 10, are you upselling and cross-selling in your parts department? Okay, great, Sarah, that's exciting, but I don't actually know what upselling and cross-selling is, so why don't you tell me? Well, I'm glad you asked. As we think about upselling and cross-selling, I would say upselling and cross-selling is happening to you all day, every day. You just may not realize it's happening to you all day, every day. How many of you have gone through the Golden Arches and got yourself or your children a good old meal from the Golden Arches before? Our friendly McDonald's. I don't care where you are in the world. If you didn't raise your hand, you're lying to me. But we love, in Kansas City, McDonald's. We love McDonald's. And I have 3 kids, and so I'm just going to be clear. As a parent, my children have eaten their fair share of chicken nuggets from McDonald's. Like, those Happy Meals are no joke. Like, they are no joke. They bring happiness for all of us. Okay, all of us. And so we've gone through McDonald's a number of times, and my favorite thing to get at McDonald's is a quarter pounder with cheese. Like, can I just, so good, right? A quarter pounder with cheese is my thing to get at McDonald's. So I drive through McDonald's, I get my kids all the Happy Meals so that we can just continue on with our day. And when I order my quarter pounder with cheese, what do they say to me at McDonald's?
You want fries.
Do you want fries with that, right? Or they might even say, would you like to make that a large or a meal, right? Would you like to make that a meal? They're saying, Sarah, people like you who came into McDonald's to buy a quarter pounder with cheese, which is the right choice at McDonald's, have a better experience when they leave with fries in a Diet Coke. If we all agree, life's better when we got a Diet Coke in our hand. Okay, so we live with fries and a Diet Coke. It's a better experience. Do you know what they just did to you? They cross-sold you. They said, people who came in with this had a better experience if you had X, Y, and Z. What at your parts counter could you cross-sell? If somebody came in and asked for an oil filter, what could you say? People who come in and ask for an oil filter also have a better experience if they leave with oil. Look at that. Y'all are winners. You're catching on real quick. There's a number of things that you can simply say, hey, if you come in asking for this, you are going to have everything you need if you actually leave with this. How much more does it cost for you to actually ask somebody if they want to leave with oil, with the oil filter? $0, right? How much margin can you make if you ask somebody if they want to leave with oil and the oil filter? A huge amount of margin because they don't have to come back in. It doesn't take any extra work really on your part, no other employee time, and it starts increasing that profitability of the parts department really quick. That's what we've got to focus on. There's again this small little company outside of Seattle called Amazon, and Amazon has this figured out. They've got this figured out to such a thing that over 30% of the business on Amazon.com comes from cross-selling on their website. 30%. How many of you have ever gone through Amazon before and you have put something in your cart and then underneath of it says, people like you who bought 47 pounds of beef jerky had a better experience when they left with fishing poles, some beer, and a tote bag to go with it. All right, you're like, Sarah, how would you know my Amazon order? That's a little bit personal. Okay, no, I'm sorry. But 30% of Amazon.com's billions of dollars of business come from simply saying people like you who bought this, bought X, Y, or Z. Now, the other split side of this is what we're going to talk about upselling. Okay, upselling is when we go through McDonald's and we order a large Diet Coke and they say to you, or you order a medium Diet Coke and they say, would you like to make that a large? Or they used to say before they got sued into oblivion, would you like to supersize that? Right? That's what they say. Yeah, we all remember that. Way to go, McDonald's. And so what they're doing there is saying for a little bit of extra money, you can have a much better experience with this product. That same thing holds true in your parts department too. Would you agree? How many of you know the difference between aftermarket and OEM parts? Can we all agree that an aftermarket oil filter and an OEM oil filter have a difference in filtration? There's a difference in filtration. Does it cost a little bit more money to get an OEM oil filter versus an aftermarket oil filter? Is there a reason that we would spend a little bit of extra money on an OEM versus an aftermarket? Yes, there is. But your customers don't necessarily know that. And so when we're looking at this upselling opportunity, there's an education piece as well. Another really easy upsell is that inside of your service department, if we wanted to sell more batteries, how many of you have ever had somebody come in and say, I want the cheapest battery you have? Somebody ever come in and say that? Yeah, all the time. And is there a better way? Is it a better investment for them if they buy a little bit of a better battery? Absolutely, all day long. That, my friends, is upselling. So rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. We are upselling and cross-selling in our parts department. All right, the next thing I want you to rate yourself on is, do you know your fill rate out of stocking inventory? How many of you go, Sarah, I don't even know what that means, so no, I don't know what that is, okay? All right, there's a few hands. Thank you for your honesty. Your fill rate out of stocking inventory tells you what percentage of the time somebody walks up to your parts counter and leaves with the part that they need. Okay, that's what the fill rate out of stocking inventory is. What percentage of the time does somebody walk up to your parts counter and leave with the part that they need? What do you think we our fill rate out of stocking inventory to be? 70% cut it?
85.
This. What do you think?
85.
85, what do you think?
80 or better.
80 or better. Okay, you expect most of your manufacturers, now again, over the last few years, it's been a little bit weird with parts inventory, but most of your manufacturers run between 90 and 95% fill rate out of stocking inventory. If you need something, 90 to 95% of the time, they can get it to you. What makes us think that it's okay for us to have anything less than 90, 95% for our customers too? I'm going to push you and challenge you to say, move to that point where we have 90 to 95% of the parts that we need. Now, we do this by having what we call a shallow but wide parts inventory. We just have a few of every part that we need on the a better SKU of parts. So to figure out the fill rate out of stocking inventory, here's what you're going to do. You're going to take your total parts sold. For this example, we had $100,000 of total parts sold. Then we're going to subtract our lost sales, emergency orders, and special orders from that number. Now here's the tricky part about fill rate out of stocking inventory. There is a number that not many of you are keeping track of, and that is your lost sales. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you actually do keep track of your lost sales? Okay, there's 4 hands. Love that. Okay, I love that. But that's going to be such a pivotal number that we have to know if we want to run a parts department well. How many of you make decisions on what you're going to bring into your parts inventory based on demands? If you get 3 demands over the course of 90 days, you bring that sucker in and you say, well, this is a new stocking part. How do you keep track of that? How do you make that decision if we're not tracking lost sales? If somebody comes up and says, hey, do you have this oil filter in stock? I don't know, that's a bad example, but you have this part in stock, and you say, no, we don't. They go, okay, I'm just going to go online and get it. That's fine, I'm going to go get it online. You go, wow. Why does everybody shop online? They came to see you first and you didn't have it. That's why they're going online. I would encourage you, so we're going to take this lost sales, special emergency orders, and we're going to subtract it from that total parts sold. Then we're going to redivide it by our total parts sold. Our fill rate out of stocking inventory for this example is 81%. If we want to increase our fill rate out of stocking inventory, we don't necessarily need to add more dollars to our parts department, but what we need to do is make sure that we have just a few of each part in stock, but we have a wide SKU of parts in stock. That's the strategy for that, okay? The next thing we need to look at is, do we actually have a pricing strategy in place? One of the easiest ways to make money really quickly in your parts department in a way that's not illegal, moral, unethical, or life-threatening, because my mom always said if it's one of those things, we're not doing it, okay? So as long as it's not one of those things, the easiest way that we can generate really quick money really fast and improve our margins in our parts department is by adding an extra 5% at a minimum on all the parts that we're selling through the service department. Is anybody adding an extra percentage on the parts you're selling through your service department right now? All right, I'm just curious, what percentage are you guys at? Just shout out some numbers for me.
65 over cost.
65 over cost, okay, so on your service department.
Service.
Okay, what else do we have over here? What percentage are you doing on your service? 5 over, okay? 30% over? Okay, you're a hero. Thank you, welcome to America, I love that. Okay, what about, yes, what do you have for yours? 5%. All right, I would just say, it costs you more to sell a part to the service department than it does to a counter customer. Would you agree? I want you to think about it for just a second. If somebody comes into the service department and they need to buy a part from you through the service department, what kind of extra costs do we have involved in that? First, we have to have somebody go look at the unit, communicate to the parts department on what kind of parts we were going to need. Then the parts manager or someone at the parts counter had to look up the part. They then had to come out with a quote for the part in many situations. And it went back to the service manager, who then had to reach out to the customer and ask for approval on the part, who then said yes or no, and then it went back to the parts department so that we could pull the part. Finally, we had to pay someone, our service support specialist, who then took it back to the parts department so the technician could put the part on the unit. Now, what happens when somebody walks in to get a part? They've provided some of the labor for you, right? They walk in from their vehicle, walk into the parts counter, they come in with the make, model, and serial number, right? No, that was a joke. Okay, that was a joke. Listen, you can't do too many jokes with the parts department, but that was one of them. Okay, so they come in, and they at least provide their name so you can look them up in their system, and we can start the discovery method to figure out what part they actually need. You then give them the part, go get the part, give them the part, check them out, and they go on their merry way with the part. Okay, so help me understand how it doesn't cost more in labor for us to sell a part to someone through the service department. We're going to add an extra 5% at a minimum on all of the parts that we sell through the service department. Now, to do this, you can do this one of 2 ways. The first way is if you have business management software, most of them have a button in there that you simply click and it adds that extra 5% on all the parts that you're selling. All right, that is the easiest way. If you have a business management system that does it, look into that tomorrow. Every single one, simply click the button, magically you've got this extra percentage. The other way is if you don't have that kind of flexibility, we're going you to say, Sarah, we don't do that, we like our money too much. Okay, all right, respect to all of you. No discounts for you. No, okay, here's the deal. There are certain times where it is valid to give customers their discounts, okay? I would agree. If we've got a really big commercial group who buys a lot of parts from you over the course of a year, I'm not opposed adamantly to giving discounts, but I am opposed to not standardized discounts. That's what I'm opposed to. And I'm also opposed to the fact that anybody can give discounts. No, 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 my friends, not anybody can give discounts. We were working with a dealership down in the Mississippi area, and they kept going, man, our margins are just falling short. Our margins are just falling short. And Bob was working with this dealership through our Dealer Success Group program, and he said, let's dive into this. Why is it that our margins are consistently about 3% lower than where they need to be? So they started walking through this, and he said, hey, who at your parts counter can give discounts? And he said, well, everybody. So we said, well, here's the deal. For the next 30 days, the only person who can give a discount at the parts counter is the parts manager. And you know what happened over the course of those next 30 days? Their parts margin went up to 3% that we were missing. Your parts discounts have to be consistent and clear, and the expectation has to be set. And I'm going to push it one step further. While I love parts discounts, I think one of the best things you can do in the parts department is actually not give parts discounts at the time of purchase. One of the best things I've seen to create a sticky parts department, and again, not literally but figuratively, where it's really hard for people to go anywhere else, is that instead of doing parts discounts at the time of purchase, what we're going to do is say, hey, over the course of this year, I'm going to give you a 2% discount if you're going to hit X amount of parts. I don't care what your number is. You need to find one that's right for you. But I'm going to give you this X amount of discount, but instead of giving it to you when you buy it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in a separate account. And then on December 1st, you, owner of this landscape crew, you, owner of this municipality, you, owner of this golf course, are going to get a check from me. And this check is going to be for that 2% of all of the parts that you spent over the course of the year. And they go, wow, that's pretty cool. Because what happens typically at the end of December every single year? Anything happen? Christmas. Okay, Christmas. And so all of the money they spent with you buying parts from you, which you would have already paid out in anyways in their discount, goes to fund their family Christmas. Who is the hero in this situation? You are. So it's doing the same amount of money, it's with the same type of discount, but it's just changing the way we look at it slightly. So rate yourself, 1 being dumpster fire, 5 being gold stars, do you have defined customer discounts? The next one, our freight account is positive. When you look at your parts department, how is your freight account doing? Are you positive? Or let me see a quick show of hands. How many of you have a positive freight account right now? Oh, this is just truth time. How many of you have a negative freight account? How many of you have no idea where your freight account is? Okay, there it is. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. This is something we need to know. This is something we need to know. Where is your freight account is? Now, here's the deal. Our freight account is not necessarily supposed to be a profit maker in our dealership. Would you agree? It's also not supposed to be something that we lose money on. Would you agree? Our freight account should be neutral, if not just a tiny bit positive to help us offset costs. That's our goal, is we want a neutral freight account. And so with that, when we order parts, special order parts or emergency order parts for customers, do we need to charge a little bit in regards to freight? Yes. We do. Now you can do this a number of ways. The first thing you could do is just say that you have a standard freight number for all orders under a certain amount of weight. That's one way you can do it. For most of our dealers, that's between about right under $10 per order per part, up to about $15. Again, depending on the weight. We have this all broken out in our dealer toolbox for you too. So based on weight, what you can expect on your freight. The other thing you can do, we had a dealership who, 3 locations, they were walking through this and they said, Sarah, Bob, they were working with Bob on this, and they said, Bob, here's the deal. I don't feel like I can charge my customers shipping and freight on my parts. We go, okay, well, why not? He goes, I just don't feel like I can ask that of my customers. Their freight account at the moment, when this was happening, was $60,000 in the hole. 60 grand. Cool. And so we said, well, here's the deal. We've got to address this. How we address this is up to you. We can either start charging freight, or we can start increasing your parts cost to help offset the freight if that's not something you want to do. And they said, that's what we want to do. So they were doing a huge amount of parts. So they were a big construction dealer. They were doing a huge amount of parts. So we simply raised the parts by 1%. 1%. All the parts got raised by 1%. And over the course of that next year, it offset the cost that would have been in the freight account. How you do this is up to you. You can either charge customers a little more for the shipping and handling. And listen, I don't know what handling is specifically, but it's clearly very expensive, right? Like it's clearly very expensive. Or you can sit here and say, we're going to raise the price of our parts by maybe 1% or 2% so that you can keep that freight account cost neutral. How you do that is up to you. The one thing I would say is if you raise the cost of all of your parts, here's what I want you to keep in mind. I want you to keep in mind the fact that we have to make sure that the person in accounting knows that we are not just raising parts 1 or 2% for the sake of raising parts 1 or 2%. That money needs to be offset into a separate account to keep the freight account neutral. Are we all on the same page here? All right, so rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. Where is your freight account at? Finally, we have a plan to burn down our parts inventory. Now, when we start talking about burning down parts inventory, I typically get this look of confusion from most people, and they say, you want me to do what to my parts inventory? No, that's not what we're talking about here, friends, okay? I'm not saying go burn your parts inventory to the ground. That's not what we're looking at. What I'm saying is we need to be strategic in regards to how we are doing our inventory and when we have the peak of our inventory. And outdoor power equipment specifically, by the time we hit July, we need to have a strategy in place that we start burning down our parts inventory to about 30% of what we need at peak season, okay? So by the time we get to about this time of year, when we get into August, September, October, I only want to have 30% of the inventory I had at peak season. Why is it that I would only want to have 30% of the inventory I had at peak season when I start hitting the slower months of the year? Why is that?
Don't want to carry that money through the slow time.
You don't want to carry that money through the slow time. And what's going to happen when you start going to your national dealer meetings and your reps start coming out and asking you to do parts? Are they going to give you some pretty good deals on parts if you have some liquid cash available? Oh yeah, they will. And even better, if they're going to put the parts on their terms and you can just have the parts on their money, let's go. Now we're in business. But here's the deal. So often, I see dealerships not have any change to their actual strategy of what they have in stock at any given stance. And then we get into the slower time of the year and like, man, we're crunched for cash. Like, this is tight. And I've never seen a parts person or anyone inside the dealership said, hey, I'm going to take parts in lieu of my paycheck this month. Like, have you guys had that happen inside of your dealership ever? No. And so if we can turn some of our parts into cash, that's the direction we need to go when we start doing that. So typically in July, we come up with a strategy to start burning down our parts to about 30% of where it needs to be. So by the time we hit August, September, we have 30% of what we would actually need. And here's the cool thing. For most of you with your manufacturers, and again, this hasn't always been true for the last 2 years, but it's constantly changing, and I think we're going back to it. Most of your manufacturers, if you really needed a part, how quickly could they get it to you with the last 2 years out of the picture? Within 24 to 48 hours if you really needed it, right? So let's start making this move away from having these parts on hand and start focusing on what we can do with this extra cash. And here's the thing. What we just walked through over the last hour together is where I would start if I were you and I was a parts manager. I would look at each one of those things that you just rated about your parts department and find the one that is the greatest dumpster fire for your dealership. Everybody's going to have something that's a little bit different, but start there. Start with that. Then find the one that needs the next most work and the next most work, and that we can have this impact and this growth that happens in the parts department. About 2 weeks ago, I did something that I had been working on for years. I did something I've been working on for years. My friends from college emailed me, texted me, they didn't email me, they texted me and they said, Sarah, I know that most people in college with their girlfriends from college go on beach trips, but we have a different idea. Let's run the Chicago Marathon together. That's what they said. And I said, whoa. That's really great. I love that. I love that idea. But shouldn't we be sitting on the beach drinking margaritas and having a good time? You want us to go run 26.2 miles? That terrible idea, but they said, no, this is what we're going to do, Sarah. And I, in a true team player mentality, said, let's go. Let's go. We're going to do this. And so 2 weeks ago, I ran and completed the Chicago Marathon, and it was an incredible experience. But one of the things that happened in the midst of the Chicago Marathon is I realized that I was a really, really, really lazy fit person. Okay, I was a really lazy fit person. For many years, if I was running, you should have been chasing me too, because something was going dramatically wrong in my life. Anybody there as a runner? If you're running, you're like, Sarah, if I'm running, you should be running too, because things are going really negative, really, really fast. And so that's where I was for a number of years. And so something had switched, and I decided to do this. And I realized that in the midst of this, I was doing the minimum I could to be able to complete this silly race that we were getting ready to do. So we were getting ready for race day, and one of my friends said, Sarah, when you run the Chicago Marathon, there is this blue line that goes through the course. And if you follow this blue line, it is the shortest way to get your 26.2 miles done. And I said, count me in. Okay, count me in. I'm not here to be an overachiever and run more than 26.2 miles. If you go outside of the blue line, over the course of the 26.2 miles, you will run up to 2 extra miles during this race, and I was not into any of that. Like I told you, I was a really, really, really lazy fit person. So I said, all I'm going to do is focus on the blue line. It is the quickest way for me to get from here to where I'm trying to go, and that's what I'm interested in. What I just did for you today, for the Parks Department, is your blue line. Like that is your blue line. If you follow what I just laid out for you today, this is the quickest way you can move towards success and profitability in your Parks Department. But here's the deal. Some of you are going to still say, like, Sarah, we're going to deviate on this a little bit. Like, I know you said this works for 7,000 other dealerships, but we're special. Okay, I love that for you. I really do. And maybe there's some complexities about your dealership, I don't know, and you need to change things. But what I've laid out for you is the quickest way towards success for your Parks Department. Now, it's up to you if you take it or not. I can't make you follow the blue line. Maybe you want to do the extra miles because you just feel like that's a good time for you. Good for you. Bless your heart, but that's not me. So come up with your strategy and make sure that you don't overcomplicate your route to success with your Parks Department. Pick the shortest route and stay the route because that's where you need to go. All right, on that note, y'all have been so wonderful. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.